Happy holidays, and welcome to the Who's Left podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm recording from Bloomington. You know, President Lyndon Baines Johnson once said, and I apologize for the antiquated language, quote, "If you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you." The sentiment behind that quote is the defining political fault line in this country for the last several generations, if not for the entire history of this nation. During his time in office, Johnson was responsible for ushering the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the Fair Housing Act through Congress. And you can draw a straight line from the backlash to this progress right on through to the white nationalist administration of Donald Trump and our current crisis. Richard Nixon operationalized it through the Southern strategy, deliberately turning racial resentment into an electoral weapon. Instead of asking why wages were stagnating or why unions were being crushed, white voters were taught to fear desegregation, urban crime, and social change. Government didn't fail them, those people took what was theirs. The result was a political realignment built on grievance instead of material improvement, with white Southern Democrats beginning to flock to Republicans in droves. Ronald Reagan perfected the formula. He wrapped it in patriotism, free markets, and the myth of a shining city on a hill, blaming, quote, welfare queens and young bucks getting a handout while real Americans worked harder for less. The B-list actor and corporate pitchman sold working-class whites the hyper-capitalism that would shutter their factories and decimate main streets. While taxes were cut for the wealthy and public goods stripped for parts, the wealth class pointed the finger at those people. Working-class white voters were encouraged to identify upward, not sideways, to defend a system that was actively hollowing out their own communities. Donald Trump did not invent this politics. He just stripped away the euphemisms. The resentment was no longer coded, it was shouted. A dog whistle became a bullhorn. Immigrants, protesters, trans people, city dwellers, elites, the targets shifted, but the function stayed the same. Keep people angry at each other, and they won't notice who's picking their pockets. That is the political environment Lisa Williams is organizing in. Lisa grew up poor in rural Indiana. She understands how economic precarity, racial narratives, and political cynicism get woven together, concocted in think tanks and institutes, then debated in kitchen tables and break rooms. Her work with SURJ, showing up for racial justice, isn't about shaming people or winning arguments online, it's about breaking that cycle, organizing white working class Hoosiers into multiracial solidarity by helping them see how race has been used to divide people with shared material interests. In the following conversation, we'll talk about how that work actually happens, taking risks, making mistakes, learning, growing, and making amends. And we'll look at what it takes to build trust in communities that have been lied to for decades. It's not theoretical, it's practical. And in a state where division has been weaponized as policy, it's some of the most serious political work being done. But I do have a laugh for you if you stick around till the very end. Real quick, before we get to the interview, one big ask. This is an independent media project. I don't paywall content, I don't sell out to advertisers, and I don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. I refuse to gatekeep valuable information in the middle of a political crisis, even to my financial detriment. So please, if you find value in this work, go to whosleft.us and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help me write more, research more, and organize more. But wait, from now until the end of the year, we're running a Ho Ho Ho's Left holiday special, and you get to become a paid member for 30% off. That's right, only $3.50 a month or $35 for the whole year. Not ready for a long-term commitment? You can make a one-time contribution on Cash App or Venmo. Links are in the show notes. Look, It is my sincere hope to turn this thing into a full-time progressive media outlet to pop the bubble of right-wing disinformation in the state, but I need your financial support to do so. And I get it. The holidays leave your budget stretched tight. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding articles to your people. You can get me next time. Mostly, we just want you to be here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, X, TikTok, Mastodon, and YouTube at Who's Left. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Thanks again. Now, here's my conversation with Lisa Williams. All right, I am here with Lisa Williams. Lisa, welcome to the Who's Left podcast.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm glad to have you. I have been admiring your work from afar.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So why don't you tell the good folks about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Lisa Williams. I was born and raised in Steuben County, Indiana, now living in DeKalb County, Indiana. Done a bunch of stuff. I've been a party officer in Steuben and DeKalb. And I grew up really poor. So I was really interested in politics, though, because it definitely affected my family. Like, we depended on the township trustee a lot of time to pay our bills. So when I ran for office, I ran for township trustee twice. Did not quite make it, but I got a lot more votes than I thought I was going to. And I naturally got involved with this organization called SURJ, who organize working class white folks into movements for social justice.
Fantastic. And we'll talk a little bit about SURJ here, in a little bit. But I want to talk about you wear a lot of hats. What you mentioned growing up, let's say financially challenged, and same likewise. I feel that, and what led you to sort of put that together, I think a lot of folks, are unhappy with their station in life, sure, but they don't realize maybe the outside forces that are pushing people that way. There's very much this culture in this country where if you're not doing okay, if something's wrong, it's your fault. It's a personal failing. It's a moral failing because you're a bad person and you're a sinner, right? But alas, that is not true.
Yeah, definitely not true. So because we ended up depending on township trustees, I realized that was an elected position once I got interested in politics, which was actually pretty young. I was in middle school for the 2000 election. And to my dismay, I found out that my dad was a Republican, and I was like, but why? They institute all these policies that are definitely not helping us when we're struggling to make it. And so, ever since then, I really followed politics closely, but I didn't really think that I had a place in the political process myself, other than just voting and occasionally calling my representative to complain, until 2015, 2016, when I really noticed Bernie Sanders, who I adore. And then I called my county chair. At the time, I was living in Steuben County. And I said, my name's Lisa Williams. I live in Hamilton, Indiana. How can I help? And they put me to work pretty quickly. I helped with social media. So I was one of the younger folks back then. I recently, last year, in 2024, I aged out of Young Dems, which still a little in my feelings about. But
oh crap, I'm getting old. I feel that every day. Let me ask about your dad. Did you ask him for not confront, but did you ask him why he's a Republican?
Basically, he really bought into this whole the strategic racism that the Republican Party tends to use in order to turn working class white folks against the rest of the working class. And it took a lot of talking to him, but eventually in 2016, he did vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary. So it took a long time, but I did eventually win him over. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years later. But he was a progressive there at the end. So he finally got it.
I'm sorry you didn't get to enjoy more time on the same page with your father. So what was it about Bernie that drew you to him? I mean, I'm a Bernie guy too, as everybody here probably knows. But what was it specifically about the Sanders campaign in 2016 and that made you go, I need to not just vote for that. I need to volunteer and get involved.
I think his campaign did a really good job of being like really encouraging to younger folks like AOC and like others who in the squad who have run. And that was also really inspiring to see like other folks like me who think the same way and, trying to apply that to rural Indiana is a task because it's definitely different from New York, but
Yeah, certainly. Well, so obviously, we were disappointed in 2016 when Senator Sanders didn't win the nomination. Even more upset, certainly, when Trump won the general election. Now, it would have been easy, I suppose, to go hide under a desk and lick your wounds or whatever. But you kept involved, you kept organizing, you leaned in, and now you are wearing like so many hats.
yeah, so earlier this year, I was appointed to the Rural Issues in Small Towns Task Force with the Indiana Democratic Party, which is chaired by Michelle Higgs. And she also does the Indiana Rural Summit, which is how I got involved through there.
Fantastic. And did I see? I mean, like you sent me your bio, and I was like, oh my god, like so impressed. And you also volunteer with Working Families Party. I understand now. That's
Yep.
another group does fantastic work. We do not have an Indiana chapter yet. Um, is that something? Are they looking to start one? Are they looking to build one here? I'd be very interested in having something like that here.
Not to my knowledge, but I would be interested if that were ever to be on the table. I do know that they are in Ohio, and I also lived for a short time in Ohio when I was younger.
And I also saw that you're involved with your local DSA. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have a chapter here, but I
Oh,
have
okay.
been to some of the Zooms for some of the other chapters. Well, mostly just there was a national call that I was on, and then with Central Indiana DSA, so I got invited by Jesse Brown to go to one of their meetings. So I was happy to see how that works since we don't have a chapter here. So I'm just an at-large member.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, is that something that you maybe you're going to
I
wind
would
up
be
being
interested.
tasked with doing yourself there too? You're going to have to start in the Northeast
Well,
Indiana.
even if like I'm not like taking the lead or anything, I would love to be able to help with whatever.
Yeah, fantastic. And boy, I mean, you've been busy even in an off year for us here in Indiana. You did some work there in Virginia, making a lot of calls for Abigail Spanberger out there.
Yeah, I worked for the outreach team. We were contracted with Work Money, and their nonprofit values aligned with Abigail Spanberger's platform. So they weren't like endorsing her, but they were just supportive of those policies since those would help working class folks more.
Yeah, certainly. And boy, she had a good election night several weeks ago, as did Democrats at large, and even Democratic socialists like Zoran Mamdani in New York. It was quite exciting, and yeah, you really would you hope to continue that momentum into 2026 and through the midterms. Really, with Trump being so unpopular and so, I don't know, outrageously fascist. It is it is bad. People are hurting now. Their policies are causing death and mayhem and disruption now, and I don't want to minimize that. But it really does set up an opportunity for a major change, a major wave election, and to really, I don't know if you're familiar with judo, but it's you use your opponent's momentum against them and you kind of flip it around, and in many ways, I think the Trump era, and again, I don't want to minimize the suffering, but really could be a turning point and an opportunity to build something better and more sustainable and more human going forward.
Well, and I think that also folks recognize that like we need that if we're going to sustain as a society, like things have to get better. Like folks can't afford to go to the doctor. That was part of the issue with my father was he then, being a stubborn boomer and not really wanting to go to the doctor anyway. Yeah, it's got real life consequences. Like people can't pay their mortgages.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Now you mentioned the sort of racism that Republicans use to sway folks like your father, maybe cultivate resentment in them. And so I kind of find it ironic in a way to talk about the whites only organization that you're a part of. Now, we stop right there. People are going to say, "What?" So tell me about SURJ, that is showing up for racial justice, is the name of the organization, and why? Why did I describe it like that?
Yeah, so SURJ has been bringing white people into fights for racial and economic justice since 2009. It was a long overdue answer to the call from Black leadership for white people to organize our own. The founders of SURJ were actually mentored by members of SNCC, which was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And they have been really focused on reinforcing this idea and fact that we are not like white saviors. We have shared interests in making sure that things are fair for working class folks of all kinds.
And SNCC, for folks who don't know, the SNCC, that was the one of the major groups that did organizing during the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Yes, and so the folks who started SURJ were trained by folks from SNCC.
Yes.
You mentioned like not wanting to be like white saviors, right? Like a lot of folks are like, oh, we have to use our privilege to lift up folks who are in a not doing as well as us, and that's great, for a lot of people who have their white privilege and are doing well, um, to feel that way, but it's kind of paternalistic. No, um, SURJ, it sounds like, is very much like focused on working class white folks
Yes.
and getting them to understand their solidarity with people in other communities, right?
Exactly.
And it's kind of
Um,
like, yeah, get your shit together, white people. Like the you've got us fighting against each other when we should be uniting against the real enemy. Yeah.
exactly. The oligarchs that are running our country right into the ground.
And y- so SURJ, you said, started
kind of in 2009. This is right after the election of Barack Obama, and there was very much a backlash, a racialized backlash, a white lash, if you will, to the election of the first black president, and that was not organic, was it?
No. It's definitely something that the oligarchs and these rich folks who run our country are. It's a strategy that they're using. It's a strategy they've been using for a very long time, where they have working class white folks blaming, like right now, it's immigrants. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
immigrants are taking your jobs. No, a rich man gave a job to somebody that they're exploiting in most cases where we're seeing this.
Yeah, the Tea Party movement, right? That's the one that we think of as the big backlash to Obama, and that it was seemed organic. It seemed like they're a bunch of pissed off white people in their Revolutionary War garb and their powdered wigs and whatnot. And but it turns out when folks did the research afterwards, this was very much sponsored by folks like the Koch network, who saw the Obama administration not as a racialized threat to them. These folks aren't racist. They just want to protect their money, and they saw Obama as a threat to their bottom line. That he would raise taxes, that he would, oh my God, like institute some sort of universal health care, and they saw that as a threat to them.
Yeah.
And so SURJ, the folks who started this, saw that racialized backlash. They saw the oligarchs, they saw the Kochs and others drumming up racial hatred in working class white folks, and they said, "Yeah, no, we got to do something about this."
Exactly. And right now we're really focused on um, non-violent, non-cooperation, like the protests and boycotts. SURJ is part of the nationwide boycott of Amazon and the whole "we're not buying
Yeah,
it." Yeah,
Target and Home
yeah,
Depot,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, yeah, very
Yeah,
much. I
we're
actually
that.
just wrote an essay about that the other day because of Black Friday, and it is very much a time to exercise our economic power, because
Exactly.
yeah, the people who actually run things in this country, they depend on us continuing to buy their crap.
Yeah, and I think they've proven, and this is also the way that we've been talking about it in SURJ. We need to hit them in their pocketbooks. It's not enough to just be like, shame on you. Like, we need to show them, like, we're not going to put up with this.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess let's drill down from the top level and get into nuts and bolts. What does Surge do in getting into working class white spaces, and how does building that solidarity work? Like, what are these conversations like?
Yeah, so a lot of what we've been doing this year and in my organizing, mostly in Steuben County in Angola, we've been taking part in national actions like the No Kings protests. We took part in that, and we had a lot more people in Angola than I'd ever seen at an action. That's where I was born and raised. And so we've just been talking to people in the crowd and like having real conversations with people. And that's also what we were doing on the phones when we were making phone calls in Virginia. SURJ also made phone calls there. And in New York City for Zoran Mamdani. And we were just really, we used the deep canvas model where we're having like these in-depth conversations, like if people are saying like these things that we might not agree with, like not immediately arguing, but just being like, well, like, why do you feel that way? And kind
Mm.
of digging into the core, because at you know, most people are good at heart. And so we think the more we talk to each other, the more we see that we do have a lot more in common than we do difference. So that's really what we're trying to accomplish in these conversations.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I joke about it being like a whites only space, but I mean, obviously, I'm sure you are doing stuff with other groups in your areas where you're cross organizing and, yeah, engaging in solidarity or
Yeah.
or whatever. But there are certainly it's a different conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And so we were running trainings for non cooperation with SOI. It's a Solidarity Organizing Initiative, I believe is what it stands for. And they were running trainings on how best to organize against ICE and like how we can protect our neighbors from being snatched up by masked forces.
What does that conversation look like? I mean, obviously, if you're talking to working class white folks, that's not a concern for them. ICE isn't going to come snatch them up off the streets. It's not going to snatch their kids out of the schools. How do you get folks who may be like, well, I don't care. It doesn't have anything to do with me. How do you get them to see that, in fact, it does have something to do with you?
And that's really where part of like the deep canvassing type conversations come in, because most of the time people do know somebody, and or it'll be like, even if it's just like a family that goes to their church. And a lot of the focus has been on trying to get these organized institutions to help with the non-cooperation, like find churches that you know will stand up and protect their members.
Yeah, 100%. Well, what's another issue that maybe folks, white folks, don't think has something to do with them, and it in fact does?
So when I first got involved with SURJ, it was actually in 2020. They had a decarceration project where they were trying to get folks, really nonviolent offenders, released from jails and prisons because there was so much overcrowding, and with the COVID pandemic, inmates were dying. And so I was part of that because one of the things that really impacted me in my childhood was that my dad was in jail quite often, usually because of his alcoholism. And so that was another issue that was really close to me just because of the impact that it had. We had to, instead of being able to, pay for like gas or something that we needed to pay for, like we had to pay fines and all of these things. And
Mm.
so I started volunteering with them then. And then I kind of fell off a little bit when I started getting more like with my responsibilities with the Democratic Party. And then last year, I started organizing with them again and getting some more events like in Indiana started. And we have some more events planned for early next year.
The you're talking about 2020, right? And the Black Lives Matter protests, which were largely in response to police brutality and over policing in Black communities. And because of our country's racial history, when you think of policing issues, your brain automatically goes to the inner city and like the Black community. But it's areas of poverty are over policed more so than it's not a black white issue. It is a top bottom issue.
Yes. Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, you're just as apt to hear "fuck the police" in the trailer park as you are in the projects, for sure, and
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah, I have too, definitely. And most of the reason why I knew like they need a warrant in order to come in was because my dad. And even though like he was a Republican, there was still that sentiment. That's why it was kind of crazy to me when it like all seemed to turn around with MAGA. So I was like, didn't you say something else before?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up MAGA, because their entire brand, I think, largely is built around white racial resentment. Um, but there is also that economic populist component, and now listen, we know Trump is a billionaire, or well, he certainly is now. He's perfected the grift to the point where he's a legitimate billionaire. But even before, when he was probably just a thin paper billionaire, he is a member of that class. He is one of the wealth class. He is an oligarch. Um, he was never one of us. He's not one of the little people. Um, but he talks like one, and he speaks to the jobs being shipped overseas. He speaks to, working hard and never getting ahead, not being able to afford a home. They frame these things in the wrong way. Their diagnosis that people cannot afford to live, that the American dream is no longer attainable. The diagnosis is correct, but their solutions are certainly wrong. So I guess how do you thread that needle with folks who may be enticed by the MAGA brand, who may who reach the same conclusions, who reach the same diagnosis? How do you get them to take our cure and not the MAGA snake oil?
Yeah, and it really goes back to having those really deep, in depth conversations with people because sometimes you do have to kind of hold their hand through it and be like, well, like, for example, I had some conversations when I was talking to folks in Virginia, which it felt like I was talking to like Hoosiers. Like there was a lot of similarities in like how people think and things like that. They just have a lot better election day laws. And so, yeah, it was really like the conversations about like how we're not making enough. And I was like, well, that's because these rich folks are talking to politicians who get to vote on how much the minimum wage gets to be. And, you know, there's also the politicians who don't support things like Medicare for all because they get paid off by executives from pharmaceuticals and health insurance and helping people see that it's important for us to really recognize like who the real villains are, and it's not immigrants who are just trying to get by, and it's certainly not trans people who are just trying to be themselves, and there's been a lot of misplaced hatred and a lot of like calls for abandonment from even some Democrats that have been really disappointing.
Hmm. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so like we have like folks like James Carville before who was like, oh, we just need to roll over and play dead. Or there are some folks who are like, well, there's not that many trans people, so why bother? And that's just not the case. Like we all need to get through this together.
Carville's an interesting character because he is one of the he's one of us in that he grew up a working class, poor white kid in Louisiana, and is most famous for being one of the chief strategic advisors to Bill Clinton, who grew up a poor working class white kid in Arkansas. And yet, those guys, during their time in power in the 90s, ushered in the neoliberal era. Well, they didn't usher it in. I mean, that's very much a Reagan era invention, but they consolidated. That it really became consensus once Democrats like Clinton embraced globalism and embraced hyper capitalism. So I think for a lot of working class white folks that had identified with the Democratic Party until then, um, they looked at Clinton as a betrayal. Do you get that when you're talking to folks, or is that too far in the past at this point?
Oh, I think definitely, especially in Northeast Indiana, where, we have a lot of factories. And I can remember when I was a kid, my dad's factory ended up having a lot more stuff that came in from, got outsourced to other countries. And that really affected, our standard of living, and especially with the housing crisis that happened, and it was just a lot of things all at once for a lot of people, and I think that's what really solidified it in people's memories.
And we never really got away from it, though. The Democrats kind of embraced that technocratic neoliberalism. Obama campaigned more as a progressive but governed more kind of as a centrist. He kept a lot of those old Clinton people around, his chief economic people like Larry Summers. Yeah, he was around for the Clinton stuff. Larry Summers around for a lot of stuff you don't want to talk about. But I guess for Democrats, if you were to be advising Democrats how to talk to working class folks in communities like yours, what would you say? Do we need to apologize for going down that path, or do we pretend it didn't happen and just build something new? Certainly, I don't think we can do what it looks like the Democratic Party establishment is trying to do and just keep serving up more of the same.
Yeah, I think we don't need incremental change. We need real changes that are going to really help people who need it now. And part of the issue has been this incrementalism, where folks who have the privilege of waiting are like, oh, well, we'll get there eventually. Well, a lot of people don't have that kind of time to wait. So I think we really need to deliver bold, a bold platform and policies that are easy for folks to understand, and we can explain easily how we're going to get there.
And we're going back to Carville, it is the economy, stupid, right? But, and I guess it's bringing this back to what SURJ does, and you mentioned the way some of those folks want to throw groups under the bus. How do you? They want us to abandon the woke, right? Meaning focus on an economic message, but ignore the blatant human rights abuses against other people. How do we tie them together? Because it seems very much like that is kind of what SURJ is doing. Is you're tying the economic working class message together with the social justice message.
Yeah, and so basically the issue, the policies that would be able to help working class white folks are also going to be able to help working class folks all across the board. And so we're just really trying to get folks to see that we're all in this together, and it's not pie. Yeah.
It's
You know,
very much, yeah.
we can all get the things that we need and we deserve, frankly.
Yeah, and listen, I generally hate the phrase "a rising tide lifts all boats" because I think the top 1%, the rich, like to use that phrase to suggest that if they keep rising, it'll bring up everybody with them, which is generally not the case. But we need to think of it from the other way: is that if you lift up the bottom, that gives everybody a boost.
Right. Yeah, I agree
So,
with that.
um, can you get into a little bit more about like the nuts and bolts of how you do your organizing there in your community? You said that I read your notes beforehand here that you're leading something called small circles up there now.
Yeah, so circles are they're smaller groups than what chapters are, and they follow the lead of like SURJ National and take part in whatever projects they've got going on. We have been having a strong focus on mass non cooperation, which is like the act of organizing people in large enough numbers that we can really stop these harmful institutions from functioning. So, like, rulers can't rule, bosses can't turn a profit, and decision makers can't carry out their harmful decisions. And there are some organizing pivots that we've really been focused on lately, like especially from persuading elites and electeds and relying on access to them and kind of like naming and shaming them to imposing political or economic costs like threatening primaries or like a general election for some of the Republicans who have been pushing harmful legislation.
I'm glad you mentioned like the proximity to folks in power because I was looking at the Surge website before we hopped on here, and one of the things they talk about is calling people in, and it's not like you don't want to be in with the people in power, like you call them in to have a conversation, not so you can have proximity to them, but so they can have proximity to your ideas, so they can absorb what you're talking about. Can you talk more about this concept of calling people in?
Yeah, so here at Surge, we recognize that people are human. Like, we're going to make mistakes. Like, not everybody started out as a progressive, and we can't, like, if people are willing to do the work and, really take lessons away from the things that they've done and experienced, then they have a part in the movement. And we shouldn't just be ostracizing people.
It's yeah, like contrast this with calling somebody out, right? If
Right.
somebody makes a crappy statement online, something that might be kind of racially tinged or whatnot, you can say, "Hey, man, that's racist. I'm canceling you," or whatever. Or you could say, "Hey, why did you say that?"
Right.
Is that sort of what you're talking what you're getting at
Yeah.
there?
And like recognizing like we all mess up and we really need to be supportive of people and their learning. So again, like we're only human. Nobody's perfect, and everybody is going to be, you know, have their moments of weakness or times when we don't exactly agree or understand where the other one's coming from. And we just need to try to have as much solidarity and understanding as possible and just assume the best in people. Like, nobody wants to be a villain or like wants to be
Yeah.
bad.
Well,
We would
so
hope.
much about it is like we're listen, not everybody is a political sicko like the two of us. Like most people just don't. It's not that they don't have the the smarts or whatever, or the capacity to understand it. In many cases, especially like in working class folks, you just don't have the time to sit down and you do the research and read white papers and shit. Right? It's like you turn on whatever news is on, and entirely too many places that's Fox or one of them, but even like the corporate news doesn't give you a whole lot of information. And so we have to realize, I think, not everybody has all the information we do. So it's not that folks in these communities are bad people. They're very often misinformed, and entirely too often in the last 10 years, they're disinformed. They are intentionally misled.
Exactly. And I've had a lot of conversations in my community where like people have been surprised that I'm on the left because they have this kind of idea of us like we're like the boogeyman. And if I'm just talking to them as just Lisa, then they're like, oh, well, yeah, I agree. Like it is like the billionaires who are to blame. And so people can see it. I think it's just hard for some folks to make the connection.
Yeah, it really is, and that's, I guess, the importance of the deep canvassing that you talked about listening to people, kind of pulling information out of them, maybe getting them to tell you why they think a certain thing, and the information they have, where they got it from, and then maybe getting them to see it in a different way instead of coming in hot, like, oh, you're the worst person in the world, and that's terrible, and and whatnot. So, is that a train? Is that me or is that you?
Yeah, it's there. I live between two sets of train tracks, so there's always a train.
So you're on the other side of the tracks, going in both directions.
Yes.
Back to your groups. How many folks do you have up there right now in the SURJ Northeast Indiana? How many folks do you
I
have that are working with
think
you?
last time I checked on the signups, and not everybody comes to everything that we've had, but we do have some signups. There were about 40 folks last time I checked. So it's a steadily growing group, and most of the events that we've been doing lately have been like the national actions, like No Kings
Mhm.
Part 2. We also took part in the John Lewis Day of Action.
Yeah. Do you have well, I guess let me come back to that. So with that good sized core group that you have up in Northwest Indiana, or sorry, Northeast Indiana. My bad. I'm from Northwest Indiana. It just slips off the tongue. Um, so up in Northeast Indiana, you've got a good size cohort there. I said you've got like a handful of groups then, and folks that you can trust. You said, like you said, you're starting to train the trainers.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I'm hoping to get some training started early next year.
and then from there, as you disseminate that and bring other folks up to speed, then they can go out and form their own little groups and bring them in to the larger organization. Right? It's very much like church planting. If you look at it from a like a religious perspective, they do this very thing in a lot of churches. They'll have their big congregation, and then they'll send a group of folks out to another community and plant another church, in a way they call it.
Yeah, basically that is what we're trying to accomplish. I had a lot of connections with the 3rd Congressional District, so that's why I kind of like covered Northeast Indiana initially, but we're encouraging folks, especially if they want to get into some of the immigration noncompliance. We're looking for more folks to try to get some more like rapid response type of programs started.
They I know they have this thing in Chicago with folks have the whistles, and yeah, they're very much like when you see ice in town. They large groups kind of descend to monitor the situation, to warn folks about the situation, to document what's going on there. And yeah, I assume that's more difficult in a area like Northeast Indiana, where things are more spread out, more diffuse, more rural.
Yeah, and it takes a long time to like get between the different towns, and so that's why some of the like more regular meetings have been kind of a challenge. It's like, well, where do we have our meeting? Because you don't always want to have it in the same spot and make the same people make the same drive.
Yeah, well, how are you getting around that? You got Fort Wayne and Angola and Columbia City and kind of moving things around and
Yeah, lately we've mostly been doing things in Angola, but I'm hoping to be able to try to find a spot closer to where I'm at in DeKalb County, which is kind of in the middle between Steuben and Allen, to kind of bridge the gap a little bit more.
yeah, and so you said that your group has largely been focusing on the national actions like the No Kings and the John Lewis Day of Action and whatnot, but we've got a legislative session here in Indiana starting well starting tomorrow actually by my count they've moved this thing up and moved it back and moved it up again on multiple occasions. How is your group going to message and organize around the Indiana legislative sessions and pressure our state lawmakers?
Yeah, that is a good question. So I think it really ties back to the non cooperation and like, these elected officials need to know that there are going to be electoral consequences for the actions that they choose to take, instead of just naming and shaming them, like finding like solid ways in order to organize. And I think the rally tomorrow is a great start.
Well, our lawmakers. You said name and shame. That's calling them out. Is there a way to call in the Republican lawmakers and sort of get them to see things our way? And if not the lawmakers, at least average Republican voters up in your area?
I think I actually have yet to hear from any of like the conservative folks I know who are in favor of the redistricting. I think, what
Yeah.
percentage of Indiana was it that was against it? It seems like it's
I've
pretty popular.
seen from 53 at the low end against it to somewhere in the 70s and 80s of folks who just do not support this. Well, what about everything else going on in the session? I mean, I think it's a short session this year as we're going into the midterm elections, but certainly the legislators are still going to be up to their usual fuckery down in Indianapolis as they've been known to do. What do you get? Do you guys get together and call your legislators? How are you pressuring them that way?
Yeah, I on our Facebook page we released some calls to action where it was a QR code to link to where you could write to your legislators. And one of the things that I've been trying to really encourage folks to do is run for local office. It's
Mm.
like, it's easy to, complain about the people that we have in office, but a lot of these folks they run unopposed, frankly.
Yes, they do. Is that hard to do? Especially, we've seen recently some of even the Republicans are getting it from their own side. They're threats and intimidation.
Yeah, there are some folks that I have talked to who have shown some interest in like running for like township trustee, like what I ran for before, and some of like the like really super local races because a lot of times those are a lot more impactful. Like, those are the folks, like your township trustees, who you can go to if, like, you can't afford your electric bill, which is going to be happening to more and more folks.
Yeah, absolutely. Our electric rates have skyrocketed the last couple of years, and that hits everybody.
Definitely.
So, what else you got going on in the coming weeks? I understand you have an event coming up.
Yeah, we are doing pizza for protests. And so we're encouraging folks to bring their markers and poster board. And we're going to be making signs for some of like the upcoming protests that are, I'm sure, going to be coming up in 2026. And that event is going to take place on January 4th, which is a Sunday. And it is going to be at the Pleasant Township Community Center in Angola, Indiana. And there is a link that has been shared on the Steuben County Democrats page. And we're also going to share on the SURJ Northeast Indiana Facebook page that we have.
And I will share it in the show notes. Lisa, what did I miss? What did we not cover today that you want to make sure we get a chance to talk about before we got to wrap things up here?
Yeah, one of the things that we've been talking about are these organizing pivots, which I talked about a little bit about the pivot from persuading elites to nonviolent non-cooperation and really imposing these political and economic costs. And one of the some of the other things that we've really been talking about is pivoting from turning out the current base that we already have to activating a broader constituency, like folks who maybe like don't really vibe really exactly with the Democratic Party, but they are on the left. So we're also trying to get those folks.
I don't know what you're talking.
And pivoting from advancing these policy wonk demands and incremental reforms, which I kind of touched on earlier, to advancing a really pro-democracy agenda with these popular demands that are accessible to a wide constituency. And they need to be structural reforms that are easy to understand and really easy for the public to get behind. Because it's really important that we get as many people involved as possible. When I was at this training of trainers earlier this year, we heard from some folks who were part of organizing in other countries in Serbia when they were resisting against their fascist leader. They had a big youth-led resistance, and one of the folks who was involved in that, he spoke to us about some of the things that they did where they would like block the roads and things like that in order to really like shut things down when he was unwilling to relinquish power after he lost their election. And it was really like inspiring to see that like other countries have faced these very similar problems and they came out like on the good side of it. So there is hope, and we all just need to stick together in order to get there.
That is what definitely a weakness Americans have, is that we think the entire world revolves around us, and we often forget to look to other countries for good ideas. In protest, in strategy, and healthcare, for example. So, Lisa, if folks like what they hear, if they want to get involved up in your neck of the woods there in Northeast Indiana, or in general, are there SURJ chapters elsewhere in the state?
There were some chapters prior. There hasn't been a whole lot of activity in Indiana.
Once again, SURJ's Northeast Indiana Circle Leader Lisa Williams on the politics of white racial resentment and how we overcome it to build working class solidarity. As SURJ says on their website, quote, "As white people, we are going to make mistakes when doing racial justice work. It's inevitable. But these risks are worth taking. People of color take risks every day just by living in a white supremacist world. The least we can do is challenge ourselves to get outside of our comfort zones. Say the weird thing. Ask the stupid question. And if you fuck up, apologize, learn, and grow. And while we should do this work simply because it's the right thing to do, even if you're a selfish prick, toppling white supremacy benefits you too. There is a big, beautiful, multicultural house in our collective future. Will you share it or burn it down?" You know, we've been taught to celebrate money and power when the wealthy and powerful don't give a damn about us, white or not. As the brilliant writer Zora Neale Hurston once said, "All my skinfolk ain't kinfolk." That's all for now. No new episode next week with the Christmas holiday, but Who's Left This Week goes on this weekend and next on YouTube, Facebook Live, on Twitch, and of course at whosleft.us, Indiana's most thorough weekend Sunday news and political talk show. It's a lot of fun if you can call following the news in this timeline fun. My panel and I go around the corn to cover all the week's top Indiana news stories and look at U.S. and international happenings through a Hoosier lens. I hope to see you there in the comments, but if you can't make it live, the program will be available for download later Sunday afternoon. This week, guests include Dr. Rob Stone of Physicians for a National Health Plan, just in time as health insurance rates are about to skyrocket for tens of millions of Americans. Thanks again to Lisa for this interview, for doing the work in her community, and for modeling solidarity. And thank you for listening. I promised you a laugh, so stick around after the show for a Who's Left Christmas Carol, but first, one last reminder to please consider contributing to this project with a paid subscription at whosleft.us, where you'll find my entire archive. I rely solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. In addition to the website, you can find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us, and on Facebook, X, TikTok, Mastodon, and YouTube at Who's Left. Direct message me at any of those sites with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or email me at scott@whosleft.us. While you got the old email machine out, please forward the show to a friend and have them pass it on too. Let's keep building this project and a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Happy holidays, Indiana.
It's kind of vital, don't you know? We're bound together no matter whether you're white, black, brown, or yellow. I'm dreaming that the whites get this before we lose this common fight. May your dim bulb finally be bright. Oh, race was invented to divide. I'm dreaming that the whites get this, and so I'll try to say it slow. Don't fight each other, sister. how they make off without dough. I'm dreaming that the whites get this with every diatribe I write. May the working class stand and unite. It's just a social construct to be white. I'm dreaming that the whites get this. Don't let them stir your anger so. When crooks get hardened, our hearts they harden, and we don't see their fortunes grow. I'm dreaming that the whites get this. We need each other to survive. May your bland food be blessed with spice. How our differences bring flavor to our lives. I'm screaming, won't you whites get this? It's kind of vital, don't you know? We are bound together, no matter whether you're white, black, brown, or I'm dreaming that the whites get this with every diatribe I write. May your dim bulb finally ignite. Who race was invented to divide.
Thank you very much!